It's time for my February wrap-up March TBR. I'm still doing my 2015 reading challenge, so every book I read this month fits into one of those criteria. Let's get started. For a book with antonyms in the title, I read Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet by Jamie Ford. Do you see this? Binding, paper, little blobs of ink. Do you know the pain I suffered at the hands of this innocuous little object? It's about 11 o'clock at night. I have probably 100 pages left, and I think I'll read a little while before going to sleep. Fast forward to 3 o'clock in the morning. I am now sobbing so hard that I am terrified I'm going to wake up my parents and they're going to come into my room to ask me what in the world is wrong, and I'm going to have to tell them that horrible things have happened to people that I love. I was sobbing so hard I couldn't see the page. I had to stop several times, and finally I had to get up and go into the bathroom and wash my face in cold water so that I could come back in and keep reading and go back to sobbing. It's a beautiful book, it really is. I had to give it 5 stars because it's just so powerful. It tells a great story. It isn't emotional blackmail. It doesn't make you cry just for the sake of crying. There's a purpose behind all the sad things that happen. It's very historically accurate, and it's so sad. I recommend this book if you like historical fiction and if you're not the type to read sad things and have your life be ruined. I still get sad when I think about it, and it just... Next, for a book that takes place somewhere you want to visit, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman takes place in a cemetery in England, so I'm so there. I liked this book. I did. I love Neil Gaiman. The world was really cool. Silas is the best thing that ever happened. Oh, Silas. I really liked Nobody. I loved all the ghosts. I was a little disappointed in the girl, as you can tell, because I've forgotten her name. She was fine, and she was interesting, and she gave a unique perspective to what was happening, but I kind of wanted to smack her. My biggest problem with this book is I write death stories. I love stories about ghosts and death personified, and that is the world I live in. And as such, I tend to judge these kinds of books really harshly. All the way through I think about, well, what would I have done? If I'd written this book, Silas would have been the main character. Not because I don't love Nobody, but Silas's story was so much cooler. Silas was off fighting bad guys and saving the world, and Nobody has this much smaller scale problem, you know? And because you know that there's really epic stuff going on somewhere else, the smaller story was kind of disappointing. I loved how it began. I loved the world it set me into, and then I was just disappointed in the story. I got bored. I just came out of this book feeling very meh. I think I went in with too high of expectations. Next, for a funny book, I read The Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. My mother read this book and raved about it and got everybody in the world to read it. I went on Goodreads. Everybody loves this book. It's got 4 or 5 stars by everybody. I was so bored. So bored. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. It's a quest story. The entire first half of the quest is just questing, you know, like walking through mountains and pausing at inns and fighting amongst the group, and I felt like I was on a really long car trip with people I didn't like that much. I mean, I really liked the main character, and some of the other guys were okay, but I got sick of them. They were obnoxious. Even the main character sometimes. You know, I just was like, I want out of this car for 5 minutes, and it just kept going. So they're going along, they get to the place where the thing is, they complete their quest, and they start back, and I literally groaned out loud. Like, we have to do this again. I put this book down under a funny book because the sense of humor was its saving grace. I would be so bored, and then the main character would say something really funny, and I would actually laugh out loud, and I'd be like, okay, I can keep going. And then I would be so bored, and then something funny would happen. Like, it's the only thing that kept me reading was the humor in this book. My mother read the whole series and just loved it so much. I barely made it through the first one. So obviously I don't recommend this book, but at the same time you might want to give it a try because most people like it. It wasn't there for me. Next, for a book your mom loves, I read The Ivy Tree by Mary Stewart. This is the only copy I have, but I will put up a pretty copy and you can look at that. I just got Premiere, guys, so I can do cool stuff like this. I really did enjoy this book, especially the beginning. It just turned from this really cool con story into a gothic romance. And I should have realized it was a gothic romance going into it. I mean, it's Mary Stewart, but I just wasn't prepared for that genre jolt. And I don't like gothic romances that much. I still gave it 3 stars, mostly for the writing. The writing is beautiful. The descriptions are sometimes a little long, but they're gorgeous. And the characters are wonderful. I just wasn't fully invested in the plot because it's not my genre. If you like gothic romances, I highly recommend this one. Mary Stewart is a phenomenal author. If you don't like gothic romances, feel free to steer clear because that's just what it is. Next, for a memoir, I read Ride the Butterflies, Back to School with Donald Davis. Donald Davis is a storyteller who comes to the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival almost every year. I've been listening to him since I was a kid. He is an amazing storyteller who tells these stories of his childhood, and he's wonderful. The book was good, but he's just such a great storyteller verbally. He's not as great as a writer. I wasn't as invested in the stories as I'm used to being with his stories. The ones that I had heard him tell were especially disappointing. Like, this was just so much better when I heard you tell it to me, which I know is unfair to judge the book on. I still really loved this book. I still highly recommend this book. There was a bit of gross humor that I just was like, eh, which happens when it's a book about an elementary school boy. Like, I understand that, but it just is not, I don't find it funny at all. And so I was kind of like, ugh, do we have to keep telling pee jokes? Like, come on, guys. But some of the stories were beautiful. Some of his teachers were great. I really loved Ride the Butterflies. I adored Stanley Easter. Like, that's the story of all of them that really stayed with me. I hadn't heard it before, and it's a really powerful story. I enjoyed reading it, but mostly the whole time I was reading it, I wished I could be listening to him tell stories. So more than recommending this book, I recommend you find YouTube videos or audio recordings of Donald Davis telling stories, because that is where the magic is. Finally, for a trilogy, I started Divergent. I have not read it, but I'm really enjoying it. I read half of it yesterday. I'll probably finish it today or tomorrow. It's really fun to like figure out what your faction is. I'm totally Amity, guys. I get to wear yellow dresses and play banjos. Like, I am so Amity. But it's a really fun world. Like, even though it's dystopic and there's a lot of dark things going on, I still find the world interesting. Whereas usually when I read about a dystopic world, I'm just super depressed. This one is exciting and interesting, and I'm just really enjoying it. I like Triss. She gets on my nerves sometimes. I'm an Amity. She's a Dauntless. Obviously, she gets on my nerves sometimes. I'm really liking 4. I know that Josh doesn't like him later on, but I really like 4. I find the characters really interesting. I find the world really interesting. I'm really excited to read this one. Which leads me nicely into my March TBR, because obviously to begin with I want to finish Divergent. And then of course I want to finish off the series by reading Insurgent and Allegiant. I'm really excited about these. I hope I enjoy them all the way through. As you may have seen if you're watching Josh Booklover's videos, and if you're not watching Josh Booklover's videos, what are you doing with your life? Go watch his videos. In one of them, he and I did a book exchange, and that is where I got Ride the Butterflies and the Divergent trilogy. And all the other books on my TBR pile are books I borrowed from him and thusly want to read quickly so that I can return them to him. So I'm going to be reading The Iron Trial by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare. I'm really excited. I don't know much about this one. I think I'm reading it for a book by an author you've never read before. It looks really interesting. Josh praises it very highly, so I'm looking forward to this one. And then for a book with a one-word title, I'm reading Cinder, and then a book with a color in the title, I'm reading Scarlet. Hopefully I will like Cinder enough to read Scarlet. Josh really loves these. He said Scarlet was better than Cinder, so I have to like plow through even if I don't like Cinder. I'm really excited to read them. You know, everybody's really into them right now, which is usually the reason I don't read books. I don't read mainstream books, guys, I'm sorry, but I'm getting on it and I'm reading these ones and I'm really looking forward to it. I love fairy tale retellings and I love cyborgs, so this feels like a good direction for me. So that's it for my February wrap-up, March TBR. What did you read in February? Anything really good? I'd love to hear about it. What are you reading in March? Thanks for watching and happy reading. Yeah, that works. Next, for a book your mom loves. I can say words. Anyway, I really did. I also really loved one of the other stories, but I can't remember what it's called. So that's it for my February wrap-up. Nope. January does not come after February, ever. Unless you do the year backwards. Please don't spoil them for me, or I will hate you forever. So don't do that. It's not cool.